Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News with George. George, we haven't
G'day.
seen you in such a long time, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I've moved house, started a job, doing real adult shit, I guess.
Yeah. You're doing some adulting, is what they say? Some adulting?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about the job? I mean, you don't have to mention any details as to where you or what you're doing, as in the employee you're working for. But you want to tell? I have said you've got a job in the media. That's one thing I have said, sort of thing. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you're doing, or not?
Yeah. No, I'm a sub-editor at the local paper. So I get to basically, I guess process the reporters' articles. Check them for spelling and fact check them and write the headline. That sort of thing. It's been good. There's a good amount of variety. It's all sorts of stuff. Some of them are, the regional things, the community papers, and then there's, more sort of front page stuff. And the hours are a bit funny, evening shifts, just because of the nature of the beast.
Could you make it? Because the paper goes out at like 4 a.m. So
yeah,
literally, that's where the saying "hot off the press" comes from. That's cool, bro. It's also interesting to know that if I'm looking at my local paper or certainly the online version of it, that you will be responsible for any clickbait headlines. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Not the online version. That's not me.
Do they change? Do they change the headlines between online and in the paper sometimes?
Yeah, so I think we sort of get them in the production line after they've gone online or something, because obviously you want to get them up fast. But yeah, the fitting headlines into a physical space, obviously with online it's a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
That's been really tricky.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool though, bro. It's a good time. What are you doing, Nala? You lie down, mate. Well, yes, we've been off for, I guess 3 nights officially, because I did indeed catch COVID last week. I know that I was with you guys last Wednesday night, and I went from Wednesday morning having, Wednesday morning, someone in the house had got tested positive for COVID. Wednesday morning, I had light cold symptoms. By Wednesday night, when I was broadcasting with Jeremy, I had a bad cold type symptoms. So, I kind of felt like it was going to happen. Thursday morning, I tested negative. I tested 3 times on Thursday because I actually went out, because I was still testing negative, so you're allowed to be out and about. So I went out again on Thursday whilst I was testing negative. So I tested I tested negative, then went out and did the grocery shopping and then came back. And I just had that feeling that I might, test positive during that day. So I have a boarder that lives with me and was saying to the boarder, look, I'm gonna test positive. I'm pretty sure, like I'm 90% sure I'm going to test positive. If you don't want to and you've got somewhere to be for a couple of nights just in case, it might be an idea. Not saying to them, it's time for you to leave my house. It's nothing like that. It was really for their safety, because like we learned from Dr. Anna Brooks, that you're not contagious until you're positive on the rat. So I did a rat then Thursday afternoon and I was still negative. And then they decided they'd go crash at their parents for a few nights. And then by Thursday night, I was positive. So actually in that time period, so I tested 3 times on the Thursday. I came back as negative positive on Thursday night. And then I'd already taken Thursday night off this, had already taken Friday night off this. And then through the weekend, and got to say, I don't know if you probably, if I didn't tell you, George, you wouldn't even know, because I've had a pretty easy run of it overall. I've got a bit of a cough at the moment, but then I've got asthma as well. And when I get asthma, I get a cough. So there may be some breaks where I hit, I was going to say pause, mute on the mic button if I have to have a bit of a cough. But I've had to be honest, a pretty easy run of it. I have been doing some work on the deck, a little bit so, because we're supposed to be having a barbecue this Saturday night. If it will or won't happen, we don't know. But I got to say, so I haven't really had the sore throat. I haven't really had the headaches. I've had like achy joints and achy arms. I felt like on one of the mornings I'd woken up and I'd done a gym workout the day before, like really sore muscles and sore elbow joints and stuff. But the two things that have really nailed me, one is exhaustion. So they're not really rules anymore, they're recommendations. You're allowed to exercise locally, right? So you're allowed to exercise around your house, obviously socially distanced and stuff. So we've got a park quite close to us that never has any people in it. So I've been taking the dog there to run whilst I've been positive, but there's been literally no one on the field. And if there was someone on the field, I wouldn't get the dog out. And it's a soccer field, and I walk from one end to the other and back again. So that's 200 meters, and I'm done. Like I'm done. I'm like, okay, the dog's not done. So then I stay still and throw the ball, but I'm done. And the other thing I found is I've got, I said to a mum the other day, I think I understand now when mothers talk about having baby brain, like they're so exhausted that they just can't function. Like my sister tells a story about baby brain where she talks about being in the shower and putting shampoo into her hands, ready to wash her hair. And then instead of washing her hair, she goes and pushes it on her face like she thought it was face moisturizer. And I've definitely got that. There's been a couple of occasions in the last 24 hours where after about 4 minutes of a conversation, I've had to stop and say to the person, I can't remember what this conversation's about. So how did we start this conversation? That's happened on a couple of times. So the things that seem to have hit me are the sort of the foggy brain and certainly the exhaustion. So even though I joke and say I've been working on the deck, I've been doing like one strip of wood and that's it. Like that's it. Then I'm inside for a sleep. But as to feeling in and of myself, I'm not feeling particularly bad. There's probably been 2 days so far where if I didn't know I had COVID and I'd woken up like that, I wouldn't have tested for COVID. So the symptoms aren't having me that much. Now, a little addendum to that, and I hope this helps with the science of it. I think that possibly I got a booster 3 weeks before I caught it. And yes, of course, I've had those text messages from people. Oh, so obviously the vaccine doesn't work then. We all know that Omicron gets past the vaccine, but we're told that it will help with symptoms and it'll help with hospitalization. And I'm assuming that actually the light symptoms that I've got are probably because 3 weeks before I caught it, I had a vaccine, which means my immune system was absolutely at maximum for fighting it off and for dealing with it. So I'm going to claim that. I know some people who aren't vaccinated also have an easy run of it. We're never going to know because there's no sliding doors here, but yeah, that's where I'm still positive. I tested today. I was positive. So yeah, we're just ticking on, and all I'm doing is basically hanging out and watching TV and yeah, just chilling and resting every afternoon. And so what we've decided for this week, although I'm feeling pretty good in and of myself, although I've already noticed all the speaking, I can feel it in my throat, which I haven't done a lot of the speaking during this week, is that these shows this week are going to be, well, until I work with Chewy, who we never seem to be able to truncate, we're probably going to truncate quite a bit. And it's not even necessarily that I'm feeling particularly bad and I'm trying to push through. It's that all the advice we've been passing out to you guys through our experts, whether it's Michael Plank or Anna Brooks or Michael Baker, whoever it is don't push yourself when you've got this and don't push yourself after you've got this. So I'm actually making a decision that even if I'm feeling okay, I'm not going to push it. So we'll be here the next 4 nights. It's up until Friday, but they'll probably be truncated versions of what they normally are. Will probably be, well, I want to say probably half-hour shows, but you know us. We talk about doing an hour show, and often it goes hour, quarter, hour and a half. But you know, there'll be one. We've actually got 3 little stories today. We've got 2 little stories and one more we're going to talk about, and it'll be finished before 2:45, probably between 2:30 and 2:45, and then that'll be us for the night. So yes, so thank you. A bunch of messages that are already coming in. Sai says, welcome back. Thank you for that. Sus says, sup lads. Sai says, good evening. Welcome back. Thank you. Free Soul. Good to see you, Pat. Thank you. Kia ora, lovely peoples. Yada, yada, yada. Thank you very much for all your messages. Lots of ones coming in there. Was upon you. I haven't pre-read this yet, Peter. Hi everyone. I heard Anna Brock say to RNZ this morning that the WHO reported about 500 variations of Omicron going around the world right now, but just one will do the trick, right? Yeah. So there you go. And I guess for me, I was to be honest, I was a bit worried about COVID, George. Not catching it, but I have some work lined up, which I have talked about. I'm doing some work for Today FM for the 2.5 to 3 weeks after Christmas. And I was a bit worried that the Christmas weekend, when families coming in from Auckland and stuff, that might be the time I pick it up. And then, of course, I'd be positive in the week after Christmas, and then I wouldn't be able to work. So, assuming that long COVID doesn't kick in and assuming that this passes by and it is in the rear vision mirror, I guess it means it's going to make those next couple of months a lot easier to navigate without having to worry about it.
Yeah, they seem to think it's going to peak before the new year, right? What surprised me recently of the 40,000 new community cases was that a quarter of them were reinfections.
Yeah.
And just like in my circle of people, co-workers, friends, and that sort of thing, like I've noticed just a change in terms of how many of them are getting COVID at the moment. So yeah, definitely time to be careful.
Yep. Thank you all again. We won't do this all night. I appreciate the kind words, Jay, and I appreciate the kind words from Adam. Yep, I have lots of fluids. I have been absolutely drinking liters and liters and liters of water. And this will be the last one to do with the COVID stuff, then we'll get on with the show. Take it easy, Pat. When I had it at the end, I thought I felt absolutely fine. I vacuumed the lounge and then fell on the heap on the couch after 10 minutes. Yeah. Yep. And look, Jay actually echoes what you've just said. Half of everyone at work that has COVID is reinfection. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? In an ideal world, I think we try not to catch it. Like I've never been of the volition, oh, well, everyone's going to get it someday. The plan A is not to catch it, right? But then plan B is not to catch it again. So I think that those of us who have got it right now, and actually it's funny, I've talked to 3 people on the phone for other things who all have it at the moment. So it's definitely going around. Yes, we might have a little bit of, I might be a little bit less careful for the next 4 to 6 weeks, meaning, I haven't been to a supermarket without a mask since this thing started. Maybe I'll go to the supermarket without the mask. Nothing crazy. But my family's coming down from Auckland for Christmas. Maybe we'll go to a restaurant on the Thursday night that they come down, which we haven't really done since because I've just had this, and all of them had it out of Auckland as well. So, but still, the idea for me will be now not to get it again, as you can hear the voice starting to go already. So, thank you for the kind words. Yes, we're back. We're back, and we are going to be here. Unless something happens and there's some kind of, what's the opposite of remission? Like a reinfection or a whatever. We'll be here every night this week, and we've got Jeremy Elwood joining us, Chewy joining us, and Penny Ashton joining us on Friday as well. So, George, me, and a range of guests hanging out with you. Right. Hey, only because we haven't talked about it and I followed it all the way through, I did want to have a look a little bit at Hamilton West, George. And I'm going to bring up a tweet that I put out about Hamilton West because I think the result was interesting. I was wrong in my guess. I said that I thought Labour would win it. And the reason I thought Labour would win it was because I thought that Gaurav Sharma would split the vote. Gaurav Sharma was non-effective. Hardly anybody voted for Gaurav Sharma. So the vote went to National, and National won it easily. One thing I wanted to say about it, which I have put out in the tweet already, but I thought we'd bring it up here, George, because I'd like to get your perspective as well, is this. The Hamilton West result shows more than New Zealand Labour losing a seat. It shows a massive move to the right with National and ACT. Their candidates got around 55% of the vote versus about 32% of the vote in the party vote from 2020. So it's not quite the same because in the by-election you don't do a party vote, you just do a candidate vote. But the party vote in 2020 for National ACT was 32%. The candidate vote in the weekend was 55%. That's a massive, massive, massive swing. So it's so much bigger than just Labour losing a seat. I do also mention, though, as well, it does come with the addendum that only 15,000 people voted. That I said today, but that was because I did it on Saturday, versus 40,000 in 2020. But this is exactly what the National Party wants, to firm up the narrative that New Zealand wants a change, a narrative that is gaining traction, whether it is accurate or not. Now, I'm not saying saying it's not accurate, but it doesn't actually matter whether it's accurate or not if New Zealand wants to change. This win for National and this apparent massive swing to the right is exactly what National and ACT need to be able to spend the next 12 months going, New Zealand wants to change. We have evidence of that now. What do you think, George?
Yeah, I mean, it shows that I guess it shows an end to the Jacinda Ardern Labour popularity in a seat like that, and a return to where those voters have been voting in past elections, I guess is another way of putting it. Because I guess, Hamilton West hasn't. I mean, it's sort of had 40% in terms of party vote. Not for a long time, not since around 2008, that sort of thing. Under John Key, it was we would get results like this if we sort of laid this over the party vote. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the next year's election, it totally indicates the direction that I think we all guess things are going to go.
I also think it shows that the anomaly of 2020 as well. And I think, those of us who are doing something like this, I was, doing long form podcasting and talking about it a lot, were saying very clearly that it's an anomaly. It's a COVID election. Labor's got one cycle and it will go back to how it was. I don't think anyone would have predicted back then that the bounce back would be quite as severe as it is at the moment. But the idea that you would never see another result like that again was pretty clear. And so it is going back to it. And I think Hamilton West, they talk about Hamilton West being like a good indicator of the overall election. Like typically Hamilton West is won by the party who wins the election. And if you go to 2020, obviously overwhelmingly it was won by Labour. But if you go back 3 years before that, it was won by National. So yeah, as you're saying, it's kind of reverting back to where it was. Gaurav Sharma was the candidate in 2017 as well, and he came second behind the National Party candidate. So a bit of in America, they call it a purple state, a purple seat. And yeah, it would be really interesting to see if those trends would stay the same if all 40,000 people had voted. I suspect that might be a closer result, but certainly, as we've said, it's the narrative that National wants and needed, because if Labour had held on to that, that would have been the narrative that Labour wanted the other way, to be able to at least shore up and confirm that they can say they've got evidence now for how the country is feeling, even though it's only one seat. That's how they'll put it out there.
Yeah.
Sai says it does show the local population didn't believe Gaurav Sharma. Yep, I guess that's probably fair to do with his claims. And Simon says it doesn't help that the Hamilton East Labour candidate is retiring. I guess he's retiring at the next election. Yeah, six Labour MPs, I believe, including our local. Are you where you're living now? Are you part of David Clark, or are you down? Have you officially kicked into kind of south and Tairi, wherever that boundary line is?
That's a good point. I imagine I'm still Dunedin North or whatever it's called now.
Yeah. I think it's just called Dunedin now, and the other one's, I think it's called Tairi.
Oh, yeah, right.
You got to call it Tairi, or else people in Dunedin don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, David Clark's gone, eh?
Yeah, well, he's retiring as well.
Yeah, that sort of shows the ship sinking, right? Until another 7 years or whatever, 6 years.
Yeah, I was with Jeremy last week. I think he said that, and I should have done the research, but I've had other things on my mind, including fog. I think he said that it's very rare for us to have a 3-term government. I guess I think about recent governments seem to have 3 terms as being quite common, but maybe historically speaking, it's not as common. And this government's been for 2 terms, so maybe it's the time. I don't know. There's always that idea, and people will say it's just time for a change. It's time for a change. Time for a change seems to be what people say. Whereas, and I think I've already said this once on the show, the equal and opposite to that is as valid. Which is better the devil you know. People never go better the devil you know, although that's exactly the same, equal and opposite to it's time for a change. It has the same validity to it, So.
Yeah. Also, just while we're on Hamilton West, I mean, Sharma didn't do too poorly. I mean, he had the name recognition and that sort of thing, but getting just looking at the results, getting only 300 less than ACT. So
Yeah.
ACT got 1,400 and Sharma got 1,100. Like, got to give it to the guy.
But for the incumbent, 1,100, so that's what, 8% of the vote, something like that.
Yeah, it was.
So
But I mean,
that,
he's no longer with Labour.
Yeah. But it also probably goes to show there might be a conversation one day to have about, how important is your electoral MP, the person, versus how much do you support the party. And, often, I don't know, that people do use, maybe I split my vote before where I really enjoyed and respected my local MP who hasn't been a part of the party that I then voted for. So, but probably most people just two ticks to the same side, I would think.
Yeah. And especially if, and this is how I feel about it, that those people would have wanted to send a message, right? They're sort of like they're getting their Christmas presents early. They get to tell the government to go fuck itself early in this election by voting for the Nat.
Well, I think that's a good segue to talk about other ones wanted to tell the government that as well, being the other people, the opposition, and everybody who wanted to use MIQ when that was in place. This is a story from yesterday, but it does flow into a story from today. We wanted to pick up on part of this from yesterday as well, which is, of course, this report that's come out from the Ombudsman saying that the MIQ system was unreasonable and that the ministry acted unreasonably over the voucher system. There's an angle to this that I want to actually kind of talk through, right? And that's the opposition's response to this report. The report in and of itself seems to me, George, to say basically MIQ was basically too cold and calculating and it treated everyone the same. And that's the criticism. I'll read you an exact quote from it. It says this, Boshier, that's the name of the Ombudsman, Ministry of Business, Peter Boshier said this. Said the MIQ system caused, quote, a huge amount of stress and frustration, end quote, to New Zealanders trying to enter the country, and advice given to ministers, quote, failed to put enough emphasis on people's individual circumstances. So in other words, everyone was treated the same, and that's one of the significant criticisms of this system, right? And of course, anything that's critical of the government, as you would expect, whoever's in opposition then starts to use it. So the ACT Party came out. Well, let's do the National Party first. National Party came out saying National has been calling for the Prime Minister to apologise to the hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders she locked out of their own country. Now, I'd like to actually check that. So there were hundreds of thousands of Kiwis that wanted to come back to New Zealand that couldn't. I feel like that's perhaps an extrapolation or an exaggeration. I mean, I know that there's always examples of people who couldn't get into MIQ, but hundreds of thousands, perhaps. Dr. Etty says the Ombudsman has said what many New Zealanders were saying at the time, that there was insufficient consideration for individual circumstances and that the system did not take into account the very real impact it had on people's lives. In other words, it treated everyone the same. ACT says this. This is actually David Seymour commenting. The Prime Minister told us we were fighting a tricky virus, a killer virus. We were told that a team of 5 million was forming a wall of protection. The problem is, by focusing on just one thing, she missed New Zealanders' overall welfare. It's nice hearing David Seymour talking about concern for New Zealanders' welfare, because so often ACT would come out sort of in the opposing view about the welfare of New Zealanders. Anyway, goes on to say, faced with an enormous fear campaign put on the whole country, it's no surprise that the public service followed suit and offered limited advice. The end result was cruel, one-size-fits-all MIQ lottery that created misery. So here's the thing, yeah? So both the Ombudsman and the National Party and ACT are picking up on this one-size-fits-all. Yeah. So they're all saying what was wrong with this was everyone was treated the same when they shouldn't have been. Now, the thing that I wanted to ask about and bring up and maybe get your thoughts or some other thoughts on as well there, and I tweeted about this yesterday as well. I'll put this up the tweet. Anyone else find it ironic that the two parties, national and ACT, that have been banging on for months that everyone should be treated equally. This is actually an ACT foundational cornerstone, that everyone gets treated equally under the law. I mean, they always put based on race at the end of it because of their revolting perspectives, but it's actually one of their cornerstone beliefs that everyone should get treated the same, right? That's an ACT cornerstone belief. So these two parties that have been banging on for months that everyone should be treated equally are now criticizing the Labour government over the Ombudsman report that said the government treated everyone equally. So the two parties that want more than anything for us all to be treated the same are now trying to use this report that says you treated everyone the same as a black eye to the government. That just feels a tad ironic to me, George.
Yeah, I mean, because they're bullshit artists, right? You're taking their words too sincerely, I guess. Maybe.
I think it's important, though, that we point that out. That's the point.
Yeah.
The facetious nature of my my language is obviously clear to be heard, but I'm not going to take the criticism seriously from a party that wants everyone to be treated the same, when the criticism against the government is you treated everyone the same. You know, because the flip side to that is, now have we got a new woke left-wing ACT party that wants to make sure everyone's treated based on only their own individual needs? You know, let's say maybe like the Māori Health Authority. Is that what we're now seeing? Because you can't have it both ways, unless, of course, George, you're hypocritical, which I guess is the thing you're pointing out.
Yeah, the lottery system was, I mean, interesting. I guess it becomes, if it is in fact hundreds of thousands of Kiwis, which I imagine there were hundreds of thousands of Kiwis overseas at that time, which is maybe where they're getting that number from. I don't have the numbers of like how many actually applied for.
I think there's 1 million Kiwis that live outside of New Zealand. So there are hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders. But yes, National Party seems to be saying they all wanted to come home and this big nasty government stopped them coming. What?
Yeah. I don't know what the ideal thing there would have been. And obviously there's a big fat report that's deciding what was good and bad about that at the moment. So I guess I'll leave them to that. But imagine the fuck around like you'd have to do to individually assess and in some way prioritize all those cases against other ones, right? And again, this will be a similarly facetious point, but the bureaucracy, the bloated bureaucracy that you would need if MIQ, which is already critiqued by the right as in such ways, would have had to been to have dealt with all those applications, more detailed applications, I guess.
Totally. And look, I don't think any system is perfect, and I think that there were some gaps in that system as well. But I think there's something about what we're forcing people to do to come into a country to keep us COVID free. And remember, at the time that they were doing it, there was like us and one other country in the world who didn't have COVID in the country for a period of about 11 to 14 months, something like that. And that was because of that system. Remember that, so this is my COVID foggy brain kicking in. Simon Bridges, there you go, came, put a Facebook post out there that said, this is all bullshit, we should get on with this. His own supporters attacked him on that, saying this government was doing the right thing. And that ultimately led to his downfall as leader of the National Party. His perspective on, kind of saying it's time to get back to business. Because at the time, we were living like no one else in the world. Now, did they run it on too long? Completely open to that conversation. Let's look at that. Were there cruel and unjustified holdups to some people? Probably so. But it's a little bit like, we say this a lot on this show, anecdotal evidence doesn't necessarily reflect the data overall. So the one person's incredibly sad story that they couldn't make their father's funeral because of MIQ right? That's a horrible, sad, heartbreaking story, but that may not be representative of the overall data that kept COVID out of the country for 11 to 14 months. And I just hope, what I hope most of all, and maybe I'm being a bit naive here, George, is that you criticize what's worthy of criticism and you appreciate and reward what's worthy of reward. And I think all of that has to start with, up until Delta, this country, because of how the government ran it, had freedoms. And I know some people are going to now have a crack at the word freedom because they're going to be talking about things like, COVID passes and stuff, but you know what I mean? Freedom from COVID, like basically no other country in the world. Now, from Delta onwards, which was about 12 months ago, but more than that, we can look at that as a second part as well. But it seems that this cold-hearted, calculated, one-size-fits-all, treat everyone in MIQ the same, worked pretty well for us here in New Zealand for quite a long time. Now, I've had conversations with people in the last couple of days talking about, oh gosh, this is a real conversation. I wish we hadn't had all those lockdowns because, we'd be getting on with life now. And I was like, hang on, there are countries in the world that didn't have the lockdowns that we did, well, not even the lockdowns, but the MIQs and the isolations, that are going through COVID waves right now. But what they have is a hugely, hugely, hugely higher death toll. So if we hadn't have done that lockdown, we'd be in probably the same position we are now with COVID going around again, as it is right now, but there'd be a shit ton more dead New Zealanders. So when I think about it like that, but when I think about the data and I think about the number of New Zealanders who died because of COVID, I'm confident, right, in saying that because of how we treated MIQ and COVID in that first 12 to 15 to 18 months, let's say 12 to 14 months, we have New Zealanders alive today that wouldn't have been, and fewer dead New Zealanders. And that's a pretty hard thing to argue against when you're talking about, the stories of people not being able to get in for an extra 6 weeks or something, in my opinion. Although I'm also speaking from a privileged position of already being here, so I acknowledge that as well.
Yeah, the understandable sort of point that the legal scholars all debate about is the human right of a New Zealander to come home when they want, right, or to freely come home and freely exit home and all that sort of thing. And that should, the suspension of human rights should always make us uneasy, no matter what the sort of end goal of it is. This is, by a government's nature, what they are able to do. They're able to create a sort of state of exception, like 99% of the time this is how it runs, but at this point there's like exceptional circumstances, extraordinary circumstances, and we're going to suspend norms and laws and human rights and whatever it may be. And yeah, so I guess that legal side of things, yeah, I mean, sort of fair enough, but fuck, no one knew what the fuck to do,
No,
like...
that's the other thing as well. This was unprecedented what went on. So yeah, let's have a look at a few of the messages that have been coming in around this. Mark says global health organizations were influencing the response to COVID. There was no perfect solution. It was a pandemic and no country had inadequate controls in place, or adequate controls. Adequate controls. Carl talking about the politicians. It's almost like both of these parties hypocrites, Matt. Treat everyone the same. At least we don't want you to. Give me a break. JN says, imagine the staff. I think that's what you said basically, wasn't it? The staff you would need to access all those folks wishing to return home. Yeah. So if you means test something, I mean, I actually like the theory of means testing in general. I don't think that everyone who's receiving a pension necessarily needs it. If you're a John Key type character worth $50 to $100 million, you don't probably need the $300 a week. I think means testing would be good, but that does add a layer of bureaucracy, which adds a layer of cost, which might end up in not saving you any money in the long run, as to just have it a one size fits all. So I think both have ways.
Means testing also like misses nuances as well. I mean, these are the problems of just governing as well. I mean, yeah, maybe eventually getting to a place where everything is universal and means testing isn't always needed is great, but I think
all right, and the last message before we go into the next part of the story: ACT and national COVID policies would have killed people, in my opinion. Look at all the countries with right-wing governments and the United States. Yep. And I just think that's a huge part of it. I mean, it's a hard thing to say. It's a little bit like me talking about my COVID that I've done really well. You know, like I feel quite well, although I'm freaking sweating right now. That's the other thing. I'll do one bit of work, my body just starts to perspire, and like right now I'm sweating like a blooming marathon runner. But see, my brain's just gone. There you go. That's the fogginess has just jumped out of me. But I'm confident in saying that, because what I was saying was the sliding doors thing. I don't know how I would have been if I hadn't had that vaccination recently. We can't argue what definitely would have happened if we had have opened up our borders. But I think it's fair to assume, looking at all the other countries who did, our death rate would be much higher. I think that's a fair assumption. Let's move into the story from tonight, which flows on from that conversation yesterday to do with David Seymour and what happened today in the House, and the Prime Minister, actually David Seymour besting the Prime Minister today. If you're not sure why I'm saying it that way, I will get to it at the end of the story.
At the time.
Listen carefully now.
5 Nicola Willis.
That muffled voice you hear, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, the champion of kindness, caught out calling names.
5 Nicola Willis.
If you didn't quite catch that, here it is in black and white.
This is the worst. So this is now in the record. So obviously whoever types up whatever they call it is now in the record that it says Prime Minister resumes seat. He's such an arrogant prick.
In the Hansard, the official parliamentary record, Jacinda Ardern calling David Seymour an arrogant prick.
Are you an arrogant prick?
No.
Not the most parliamentary language.
Is David Seymour an arrogant prick?
Oh, that would be an inappropriate characterisation, I'd say.
The Prime Minister just called him one.
Oh, is that right? I'm sure she wouldn't use that language.
It's a shame if that's what she said.
Though not everyone wholeheartedly disagreed with her.
You think David Seymour's an arrogant prick?
Yes. Pass. He's lots of things.
Is he an arrogant prick?
Those are not the words that I would use.
The Prime Minister just used them. Was she wrong?
He's lots of things. Those are not the words that I would use.
I think in the spirit of Christmas, I won't comment any further.
And it's apparently not the worst Seymour's heard of himself, though he resorted to rhyme for the sake of broadcasting standards.
A banker, people have called me a runt.
So I don't think David's arrogant, and I don't think he's a prick.
Look, I'm not going to comment on it. Look, a lot of things get said in the House, and I'm sure that worse has been said by them.
The apology was swift.
Jacinda Ardern texted me and said, I apologise, it's not something I should have said. And she said, as my mum would say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. I agree with the sentiment, and it's all good as far as I'm concerned.
That's good, that we remain collegial in despite of all of our various different feelings for each other in heated moments.
And so were the attempts to change the subject.
Does anyone have any questions on the emergency housing review?
Things have gone a bit pear-shaped at the pointy end of the parliamentary year. Today, the PM announcing who'll be flying the coop at the election. Hamilton East's Jamie Strange's parting gift, a savage leaving quote, "I feel I'm better suited for government than opposition." The PM denies that's a prediction of next year's election result.
Take his comment as read. He's enjoyed being an MP whilst we've been in government. He's made a decision for personal reasons.
Hardly a vote of confidence.
I totally reject that.
Christopher Luxon's feeling good after a banger bounce in our poll this year. So good, he's not even thought about what he'll do if he loses, but won't commit to serving a full term if he doesn't make it.
I'm just focused on doing what I need to do for next year.
So you won't commit to serving the full term if you lose?
I haven't thought about any of that. It's just not on my radar.
I hate
He'll
this
be
question.
gone. He'll be long gone.
But I mean, like, it's like saying, "Oh, Jenny, are you committing to drive the same car for the next 7 years?" So I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I haven't thought about when I'm going to buy. It's like, if he hasn't thought about it, the headline being he won't commit. It's like, well, he hasn't thought about it. It's a ridiculous question. It's not even a gotcha question. It's just a dumb question that they use to get a clickbait. George, there you go. There's a good clickbait. This is quite a good one. Arrogant prick. That would be a good one to put in the headline, wouldn't it? Let's just finish this up. We've got about 30 seconds to go.
I haven't even contemplated it.
Judging by today's antics, the election battle is going to be bananas.
Well, that was an interesting day today, Jenny.
We don't need Jenna's commentary. What that didn't show, though, was the question that caused that outrage. I didn't see One News tonight, so I don't know if they included the question in their story. Maybe someone in the chat can tell us. But it is on the One News website, the actual question. But interesting that it wasn't included in the TV3 story. So let me show you what the actual question was, because what I will guess I'll ask you is this a prickish question? Is this the kind of question that a prick would ask? And if it is, does that therefore mean, whilst perhaps inappropriate in the House, the wording was accurate? So this is the question that he asked her.
Can the Prime Minister give an example of her making a mistake, apologising for it properly and fixing it?
Mr. Speaker, there's been a number of occasions where we acknowledge that we will not have perfect responses. We've openly, Mr. Speaker, said that, for instance, MIQ was something that was very difficult at the time, and that there were people affected by it, and that we would do things differently were we ever confronted with that again. But, Mr. Speaker, I stand by the work that we've done as a government over this last year and over this past term. We've always made decisions that we believe to be in the best interests of New Zealanders at the time.
Question number 5, Nicola Willis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So there you go. There it was in the background. So that was the question. Basically, the question was, have you ever apologised and fixed a problem? Play it again.
Can the Prime Minister give an example of her making a mistake, apologising for it properly and fixing it?
So that was the question that got the response. What an arrogant prick. Now, I think it's a bit of a prick of a question, but the reason that I said earlier that David Seymour won this is, if you're the cheeky kid, I'm not calling David Seymour cheeky, if you're the annoying kid in the playground that goads the person and goads them 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 and goads them, and then they go whack. It's the one that goes whack that gets in trouble, and it's the one that does the goading that's won. So in this instance, unfortunately for her, David Seymour's won this round, even though it was a arrogant prick of a question. Have you ever made a mistake and apologized for it? What a twat. Any thought, George?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's fucking infuriating. Jenna Lynch just gets on my nerves, man. That teacher's pet, like sprinting around Parliament after you hear it, going to people, trying to catch them off guard about it, and the attitude when people are like, oh yeah, he maybe is, or I'm not going to comment, basically saying yeah, he is, but like that sort of like suddenly, oh, we're all like, we're all this is Parliament is polite society, and we never have such language in Parliament. Parliament is about arrogant pricking everyone. Like it's that they ask debate wanker question after debate wanker question all day to each other, basically like Jenna Lynch would do a gotcha question, but to each other. It's a big circle jerk of debate lord questions, basically, of like, that they only get, and they almost do it in this like weird, like sort of with like weird kind of flirty sexual tension, and it's just like a cesspit of weirdness, Parliament, right? And so Jacinda Ardern saying arrogant prick under her breath is like, it's on the scale of things is not massive. And what I do like about it, though, or what is sort of almost sad about it, is that Jacinda Ardern, that we got to see some of Jacinda Ardern, that she has, and she's in her rights to do this, has built this persona that is so like painful to watch, and I know it's a defense mechanism, but her again, the sort of polite society, smiley, caring for each other sort of Jacinda Ardern, that has been painful throughout these years to watch, because it doesn't really sort of ignite that political passion of like, yeah, fuck the other side, let's fucking beat them sort of thing. They are arrogant pricks, which we all know they are. It's that sort of school teacher sort of persona that is, I think, frustrated thing. I know there's like, there's a whole dynamic of gender there and that sort of thing, which is totally accurate. But yeah, it's fucking frustrating. All that stuff.
I tell you what, as well, is that Labour are their own worst enemies in this whole 3-year cycle, because they had the ability to have like transformative change in this country. You know, they had a majority, they could have done whatever they wanted, and they've chosen, and the Prime Minister, maybe as you're sort of portraying her, has chosen to try and play sort of a fair hand. And it reminds me a little bit of America, how the right in America just will be like, I will fuck you over in a heartbeat. You give me half a breath, I will fuck you over, and I will laugh and watch you while you're doing it. And the left in America seem to want to do bipartisan shit the whole time. I mean, the classic example is what happened with, the Supreme Court nominee. We don't put a Supreme Court nominee in the last year of a presidential cycle, unless it's Trump. Then we'll do it 3 weeks out before an election. You know, they just do. And if there had been a bit more mongrel in the Labour Party this year, I mean, like, I can't even think of what policies necessarily to go through, but easy ones like legalizing cannabis. You know, just they could have done so much, and they're facing backlash now over people being unhappy with how COVID stuff has gone, basically. But because they've done nothing else when they could have done whatever they wanted, they've got no positives to then go, oh, you know, what about all these? Yeah, okay, I get you're not happy with MIQ, or you're not happy with the vaccine mandates. I get that. But how about these 19 things we've put in place that have transformed the whole country like nothing has in the 3 generations before? They've lost their opportunity. They've missed it. They haven't got that to fall back on coming up to the next election. And, you know, I'm not one to predict elections necessarily, but, you know, everything points towards them being rolled massively.
Yeah, and like some of those larger like organizational shifts, you know, the Polytechnic and the health authorities in terms of the district health boards, all those sorts of things that are not things that are immediate, right? They're things that we can judge years down the track, and they're not things that a voter necessarily has foremost in their mind when they're thinking of who they're going to vote for.
Yeah. All right. There are a whole bunch of messages that are coming in. I'm not trying to pre-read all of them just because there's so many of them. This is talking about the he's a prick situation. Kim says it's very accurate. Mark says I salute her on that one, as did most of Twitter. Unfortunately, Twitter is not where you win an election, though. Simon Hughes, Jenna Lynch, ACT Party Chief of Staff, wife, News Hub, let people know that. Yeah, we've put that out there a few times before. Rob says best comment I saw, and that was calling Seymour arrogant prick is probably one of the kindest things you could say about him. Adam says, ironically, you can can now answer that question. She can now answer. I'm actually the dyslexia has kicked in quite a bit with this thing as well. She can now answer that question with the text she sent to him saying sorry.
That's a funny point.
Christopher Luxon, get the first corporate job if he doesn't win the election. Mark says Jenna Lynch is ACT. This is gold for her partner. A-hole Atheist says, my question is, we all know this about the goading / whacking. I guess that's goading a person. So why don't we all just acknowledge the goader is the loser instead of pretending otherwise? Yeah. I mean, I think that, I guess it wasn't even, I wonder if I'm not trying to defend who the Prime Minister was in some kind of state, because it was pretty gentle as well. There was nothing too serious about what he did. It was let's be honest, a prick of a question, but it wasn't particularly serious. Of Labour being fairly ineffective in the last couple of years of getting stuff through, Peter says, I find it bloody infuriating, Pat, and the next year we'll have to put up with Luxon and Seymour. Stephen says, oh, nice catch, Pat. These two parties at platform equality then complain about it on behalf of the opposing party. And Mark says, disagree, Pat. The protest was a source of Labour's woes. Now also the new right VFF groundswell. Yeah, well, I mean, when I say COVID, it's all tied into that. They since then, the COVID stuff has been the thing that's dragged them down and dragged them away, and given narratives for, various political parties to talk about, taking our freedoms away and yada, 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 yada. But the point that I was making is those things could be here now. But if they'd also passed a handful of transformative legislative changes, they'd have other things to point to. What can Labor point to? That's a really high profile, easy thing. What, fucking Three Waters? Are they going to point to that? No, because that's been turned over by the same sort of groups as the next evil. So I just think they've missed a trick, and I'm disappointed. From someone who sits on the left, I'm disappointed that they haven't put themselves in a better position to take out the next election. They've basically given all the power for the narrative to be painted by National Enact, and it's working. Yeah. And on that note, I said we'd be a half-hour show, so look at us, 50 minutes in. Let me say thank you to our... I should put it up. Hang on a sec. Banners. There we go, because we like to put up every night. Thank you to our patrons who help us make this product, help us keep the lights on a little bit, help us pay for our Paxlovid. No, I didn't get Paxlovid. That was a joke. And if you want to be a part of the team to help us make this, then all you need to do is visit patreon.com/Big Hairy News. We will have another members get together this weekend. We do one every month, and we'll have one this weekend. We're leaving it open to every person who is a patron to be a part of it, part of the meetup, that is. We were planning on having a kind of BHN Christmas barbecue this Saturday. Obviously, that's going to be predicated on whether anyone in this house is still positive with COVID. If there are still people positive with COVID, then we'll have our regular sort of Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Patreon catch-up. But if we do have the barbecue, and unfortunately Georgie Boy is not able to make it, but he's doing something else more exciting, getting graduated. Yay!
Yep.
But Chewy will be here, I'll be here, and Jason will be here as well, who's someone that you guys don't know as well, but he does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, the technical stuff for us. And we'll actually do the meetup during the Christmas barbecue. So we'll jump on and say good day. And so if you're a patron, thank you. If you want to be a patron, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. There will be a meetup this week, but when that meetup is going to happen will be announced later in the week, because it'll either be Saturday evening New Zealand time or Saturday morning New Zealand time, but we'll let you know. Good to go? Good to go, George?
Yeah. Good to be on.
This is the shortest show we've ever done. We're aiming for half an hour, and it's 10:52 p.m. So there you go. All right, so I'm going to head out of here. I need to go have a shower because I've just run a marathon. And we'll be back tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Jeremy Elwood in the hot seat tomorrow night. Until then, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, George. Appreciate you, mate.